it's so much closer to zero than it is to 1 second. It was like 10 to the negative 41st power or something of that nature. So it happened incredibly fast, faster than the speed of light. And now it continues to expand. Particles began forming in the first few seconds, atoms after 380,000 years, the first stars after 200 to 300 million years, and our solar system and Earth roughly 9 billion years later. Some 800 million years later, 3.8 billion years ago, life came into existence on Earth, starting Darwinian evolution. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a breakdown of how the Big Bang Theory places everything throughout the timeline. And going back to that last slide, we'll make a kind of a comparative analysis of the timeline versus the biblical narrative that we come to know. So you're asking the question about where dinosaurs fall into the evolutionary ladder, so to speak, for lack of a better term. So the initial single-celled organisms, as you can see there on the far left, that's the start of it, which evolved into the earliest plants. The plants evolved into invertebrates. Then the invertebrates formed into vertebrates. The vertebrate fish into amphibians, then reptiles, which gave way to dinosaurs, and mammals. Dinosaurs evolved to birds, and mammals eventually into primates. The genus Homo, which us and primates would fall under, arrived about 2 to 3 million years ago, which turned into all of us sitting here today, so they claim. So, do y'all think that this portrait we just painted of cosmic history matches the Bible's narrative? No, it does not. Big shake of the head there. Moses summarized the creation of the universe as follows in Exodus 20:11. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. So, just so I know we've all read it at one point or another, but we're going to go through and read Genesis chapter 1, just so that we can actually put our eyes exactly on God's text there. And then we'll go through all the different days. So we're starting at the very beginning, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. And I'm reading from the New King James Version. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. Then God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." Thus God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. So the evening and the morning were the second day. Then God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the third day. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth." And it was so. Then God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Then God said, "Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens." So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." So the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth, each according to its kind." And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth according to its kind, cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "See, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food. Also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, in which there is life, I have given every green herb for food." And it was so. Then God saw everything that he made, and indeed it was very good. So the evening and morning were the sixth day. And then just the very first part of Genesis chapter 2. I clicked Exodus. "Thus the heavens and the earth and all host of them were finished, and on the seventh day God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made." I know that was long. I know we've all read it, but just due to the nature of what we're trying to do, dismantling evolution, I thought it was good we lay our eyes on that and read it verbatim. All right, so it went out. Okay, well, I'll just do my best to talk a little bit louder. Okay. So day one, we've got space, time, earth, water, and light are created. Day two, the waters of the earth are separated, presumably forming the atmosphere. Land is formed on day three, and plant life is created. Day four, the sun, moon, stars, and all other light-giving space entities are created. Day five, flying and swimming creatures are created according to their kinds. Day six, land animals, creeping creatures, humans are created according to their kinds. And day seven, the Lord rested. So obviously we just asked the question about how the Bible narrative compared to evolution or the Big Bang Theory. The biblical narrative doesn't sync with the Big Bang model. After looking at the details, the two were even further off than initially expected. So here are a few examples. So the first problem that we see is the timeline for Earth and stars. There's a problem and a discrepancy there. According to Genesis chapter 1, in verse 1, the formless earth was initially created prior to the stars on day 4, which we see in verses 14 through 18. The Big Bang has our solar system forming about 9 billion years after the first stars began. The second problem we see, and all of these are timeline related. Well, this one not necessarily. This one isn't necessarily timeline related, but most of them are. The second problem that we see is the Bible says that Earth was initially covered with water. We see that in verses 2 and verse 6, while evolution argues that it was initially molten. Problem 3, and when I get to probably 5 or 6, y'all might not be able to see that, but on problem 3, the Big Bang model says that our sun formed about 3.9 billion years after the first land plants evolved. The Bible says that the creation of plants was on day 3 and sun on day 4. If there was a gap between days 3 and 4, and this is referring to what is called the multi-gap theory, the multiple gap theory, or if each day was a million years, pretty much saying that the days were not in 24-hour increments or not taken literally but figuratively. This would be referred to as the day-age theory. If you accepted those theories, or that it wasn't in a 24-hour increment, how did plants survive without photosynthesis during that long period?
Yeah, we'll cover this a little bit again tomorrow night too, because it's in my lesson. And I think the biggest problem, to me that sticks out, is this is a problem for Christians who also want to accept the Big Bang. Because you can be either or. You can be an atheist and you can accept the Big Bang, and maybe things did happen in the right timeline. But to say you are a Christian and you respect the Bible, but also it was the day-age theory, long periods of time, that's when all the specific days come into problems. Like you're mentioning, you can't have plants without the sun. If you're a Christian that says the Big Bang did happen the way scientists say, then you've got millions and millions of years of plants with no sun. So it's mostly a problem for Christians that want to also accept the Big Bang theory.
Man, that's a good point. I appreciate you bringing that to light there. Yeah, Trey.
Talking about the comparison of days and years, some are saying that the day 1 through 6 were actually years and years of each day.
Right.
But the problem comes with that, with it saying, and there was an evening and a morning.
Right, exactly.
That doesn't describe a year, that describes a day.
No, it doesn't.
And then also, in the first chapter, in verse 14, it says, God let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. Let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years. So he makes a distinction there between days and years. So if he meant to say years, he knew how. He knew what a year was. He says years right here in verse 14.
Exactly.
He specifically says days and compares that to years in a different verse.
And that's why we read that verbatim, just so we could see exactly how the Lord had it put in Genesis chapter 1 there. And we'll go into more detail about how the Bible takes Genesis in a literal sense, and just kind of dismisses that figurative or mythical way of thinking about it, so to speak. So problem 4, many plants require flying creatures for pollination, like bees, for example. But flying creatures were created 2 days after plants. We see that in verses 11 through 13, and in verses 21 through 23. So if to appease the Big Bang model or Darwinian evolution, these days were millions of years in length, again, this kind of poses a similar question to what we just asked about photosynthesis. How would these plants survive without their pollinators for such an extensive period of time? All right, problem 5. The Big Bang model claims that fish preceded evolution of fruit trees by hundreds of millions of years. The Bible model states that fruit trees, in verse 12, were created 2 days prior to the swimming creatures. And then lastly, for our list of problems here that deal mostly with timeline, the Big Bang model claims that birds evolved from dinosaurs, while the Bible model says that flying creatures were created on day 5, verse 21, and land creatures, including dinosaurs, were created on day 6, verse 24. So we see a lot of discrepancies there with the timelines. And we're going to now look at, is it a myth or is it a reality? And we've kind of already discussed that, based on some of the comments that we've already had. So another question that arises should the biblical narrative of creation in Genesis be taken as a literal account, or is it mythical, figurative, or symbolic? So we're going to look to the Bible for some of these answers here. So first, if you want to go ahead and turn your Bibles to James chapter 2, verse 21. James 2:21. James cites Abraham's sacrifice of Isaac as historical. Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered Isaac his son on the altar? So we see that James takes Genesis in a literal sense. Jude, in its only chapter, cites various individuals and events described in Genesis as real. If you want to turn to Jude, we can look at these verses very quickly. And while I'm going through these, if anybody wants me to pause for a second so you can jot some down in your notes, or if anybody wants these verses sent to them via email or however you want it, just come see me after class and I'll be glad to get you some of these, because this list of examples for taking Genesis literally in the Bible is pretty extensive. There's a lot of verses there. So back to it in Jude, verse 7. As Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them in a similar manner have these, having given themselves over to sexual immorality and gone after strange flesh, are set forth as an example of suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. In verse 11, woe to them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, have run greedily in the error of Balaam for profit, and perished in the rebellion of Korah. And in verse 14, now Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about these men, also saying, behold, the Lord comes with 10,000 of his saints. John also considered Genesis to be historical. And for time's sake, I'm just going to kind of scroll through these and show you the different points of the Bible that they're in. Again, if anybody wants me to slow down a little bit so you can write them down, just yell at me. So John considered Genesis to be historical. We see that in 1 John chapter 3, verse 12, and Revelation 5:5, 10:6, 22, and 22:2. The writer of Hebrews cites Genesis as historical, and it's all throughout Hebrew. I don't know how many verses there were actually in the lesson plan, but there's a ton of different examples of that. Peter cited Genesis as being historical in 2 Peter chapter 2, 5 through 9, 3, 5 through 6, and 1 Peter 3, 6, and 20. Paul considered places, places, and events from Genesis to be literal history. It's evident in 2 Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, Ephesians, and Romans. And the genealogies of Jesus recorded by Matthew and Luke presuppose that Genesis is history. And we see that in Matthew 1, 1 and 2, and Luke 3, 36 through 37. And most importantly, Jesus himself clearly considered the events of Genesis to be literal history. We see that in Matthew 11, 19, 23, Mark 10, John 8, and in John 5 as well. So there is a lot of verses that show that Genesis is to be taken in a literal sense. And I appreciate y'all's comments on that, and that really added to the ammunition there for that too.
I mean, going over this example and really studying this topic in depth here lately, as a whole, it makes you question yourself and how much stock you have in the Bible. Because these men said this, but so what? If they're not inspired, or if they're not, if they're not from God, then they're just men telling their theories. And so it really makes you examine, like, do I truly believe Peter was an apostle that saw Jesus because he said that Genesis is history? Do I really believe Jesus is the Son of God because he said Genesis is history? So we almost come to realize Genesis is literal through accepting inspired men, or accepting men's words that we say are inspired.
Yep.
So it really makes you examine whether or not you trust the Bible.
Right. And not that the Bible needed any more credibility, but if anything, I think that this study of evolution and creation is going to do so much more than you would initially think it would. If anything, it strengthens every bit of information that we find in the Bible and makes it that much more powerful.
Think about how often the theory of evolution changes, or the Big Bang Theory changes the details of it.
How much they can form it.
This has not changed at all.
Nope.
Over thousands of years between it happening and these people in the New Testament saying it happened, their story didn't change at all. They kept the exact same story for all those years. But the Big Bang Theory's probably changed 10 times in the last year, if I had to guess.
Yep. And it seems like when they run into a problem, something comes up, something new comes up all the time. And again, I'm not an expert on that, but just based on some of the research I've done on it, that's what seems to be the case. And that's a good point. The Bible remains constant and always will remain constant. So now we've come to a crossroads here. So either the universe created itself through nature, or it was created through supernatural cause or God. Who is right, the naturalist or the theist? Okay, so now we're going to take a look at 8 big problems with the Big Bang Theory, and this is kind of the meat, in my opinion, of the lesson here. So for us to be rational, one should only accept as truth the things that evidence proves to be true. This is the goal of science and is also supported by the scriptures. And I can read through these. There's 3 verses here. If you're, feel free to flip to them. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 reads, "Test all things, hold fast what is good." In 1 John chapter 4, verse 1, it reads, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world." Acts 17:11, "There are more fair-minded than those in Thessalonica, and that they receive the word with all readiness, and search the scriptures daily to find out whether these things were so." Now, I know the last 2 verses have more of a spiritual context to them, but we should be doing that in our everyday life, and more importantly, we should be doing that when it comes to biblical matters as well. And it's something that we all do probably without knowing it. I know, I was talking to Haley about that the other day, and I get on Facebook, I see all these new shortcuts for doing stuff around the house, all these crazy little shortcuts. And if you know Facebook, a lot of times people make content just so they can get views, just so they can get viewers, and they can, I guess, get paid that way. I'm not sure exactly how all that works, but you can watch some videos and see that a lot of them are baloney. But you would obviously try to test that out, and you would see, and you would do research to see if this was actually going to work, especially if it was a big home project. You would do some research before you did it and tore a bunch of stuff up, right? So you would want evidence that that actually and truly worked, and we do that in everyday life, and we're supposed to do that. And science is supposed to be supportive of that, and the scriptures do as well. And when we look at evidence, we'll be forced to conclude that the Big Bang Theory is irrational, and here's why. So the first problem that we're going to look at is the problem of the origin of the laws of science. So the laws of nature govern the universe, telling it within what parameters it must act within. These laws exist, but there's no evidence from nature that these laws can write themselves. And you'll see that we'll come back to this a lot as we're looking through these problems. So pretty much what I just said was that the laws can't write themselves. So where did they come from? And we'll ask that question a lot as we're going along here. What about the multiverse? This is an idea that billions of other universes with their own set of laws exist. But there's absolutely no evidence of this. And they say that it just so happens that we happen to inhabit this universe in this specific spot in time.
What's always amazed me about the multiverse is, I think the idea is that in literally an infinite number of universes, all the possibilities that are possible would come to pass in one of them, right?
Right.
That means God would show up in one of them.
Right. Exactly.
So he's in this one.
Exactly. And I don't know all the ins and outs of the multiverse, but from what I've understood is it was one of the concepts that was come up with when they hit a roadblock there as well. But no evidence to support, yes.
In Genesis, whenever they ate of the forbidden fruit of life and knowledge, that would be where knowledge came from. Where does the Big Bang Theory get where knowledge came from?
So you're asking me, where does the Big Bang Theory get its intelligence? Is that what you're saying? You know, I'm really not sure to the answer of that. If you want me to be honest, I'd have to do a little bit of research and dig into that to give you a better answer.
Yeah, Genesis, their eyes were open after they ate of the fruit.
Right, and that's a really good point there too. But as far as any kind of information that's offered up from an evolutionary or naturalist standpoint there, I'm not sure about that, or I haven't seen anything on that. Right, yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. And when we're looking through the Big Bang Theory, we're going to see that we're going to be asking that a lot.
Yeah, well, I think the information is scarce because there's the problem. You're starting from matter, right? And how does matter get consciousness or intelligence?
Right.
I don't have an answer for that.
Exactly.
You know, so how does the rock turn eventually into something that can think and reason? They don't have an answer for that.
Right.
So,
I saw you raise your hand, John.
Well, I was just thinking about this multiverse. I wonder what the statistical odds are of our universe coming into existence in evolution. And whatever they are, they're huge. And then for that to happen again somewhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just too much for me.
Right. And that's some good food for thought there. So Stephen Hawking is someone that most of us are familiar with or were familiar with as he's passed away. But Stephen Hawking was a famous atheist, theoretical physicist, and cosmologist of Cambridge University. And I'm sure you've seen him all over TV as I did growing up as well. And he made it his personal goal to try to explain the universe without the need of a creator. So he made the comment, did God create the quantum laws that allow the Big Bang to occur? In a nutshell, did we need a God to set it all up so that the Big Bang could bang? And what do you think his answer was to that? Exactly.
But you have to have a God there because you can't, the first law of thermodynamics is you can't get something from nothing.
Right. It's that's 100. Don't ruin the rest of the slides. I'm just messing with you. You're 100% right. You are 100% right. Yeah. No. I know. Oh. No, he didn't ever give an answer for it, nor did he ever attempt to give an answer to the origin of the laws of nature. And now we have Paul Davies here. He's another atheist, theoretical physicist, cosmologist, and astrobiologist of Arizona State University. And he noted Stephen Hawking's sidestepping of that question. He says Stephen Hawking gets very, very close to saying, well, where did the laws of physics come from? That's where we might find some sort of God. And then he backs away and doesn't return to the subject. We need to know where those laws came from. That's where the mystery lies. The laws. I think it's funny that he said that's where the mystery lies. But
We should know that Stephen Hawking was much smarter than that.
what's that?
He was smarter than that.
Oh, really? I was unaware of that. Oh, yeah. Oh, you're saying based on the comment there, or you're saying you know the background of him?
His IQ was higher.
So naturalists have no rational explanation of how the laws of science could come into existence in a natural way, and yet they have what is called the blind faith. And I don't think we're going to have time for it. I have a lot of hyperlinks here, and there's a lot of supplemental videos with this lesson. But I'm going to kind of explain some of it from the videos that I've watched. If we have some time at the end, I don't think we will. We can look at some of them, but in nature, we observe many different scientific laws, like Ms. Stubblefield just said, the first law of thermodynamics. We have Newton's laws of motion. The third law of Newton says that for every action there's an opposite but equal reaction. But there are parameters for a scientific law, and there's 3 parameters for a scientific law. Number 1, they apply to the natural realm because they are only observed in the natural realm. Number 2, they have no known exceptions. So saying that, well, there might have been an exception to that law, millions of years ago or billions of years ago, would just refute your belief in the scientific law because there are no known exceptions for a scientific law. Number 3 is they are rational and based on the logical conclusion seen by evidence. And I think it's funny that science always makes a huge deal about evidence, and yet here we are discussing a theory that there is really no known evidence to. So if they believe that in natural things happening, that violates the laws of nature. That would be considered irrational and creates problems for anyone who rejects the existence of God. The existence of the laws prove the existence of God and are in harmony with the foundations of science. We all know that a law cannot right itself. Everything in science is tested based on the law of causality or the law of cause and effect. Sorry, I lost my spot there. So if the universe is an effect, then there must be a cause. And there is no natural evidence of a cause. When we follow it out to its logical conclusion, the law of cause and effect proves that a supernatural God must exist. And if you are going to try to apply one of those laws to God, you can't apply the first parameter of scientific law, being that it's applied to the natural realm, and try to argue laws of causality to God or say, well, what's the cause of God, cause and effect there, because he's outside of the natural realm. And we can see that in John chapter 4, verse 24, and I'll go ahead and turn there. John 4:24 says, God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. So we see that God is supernatural. He is outside of the natural realm. So the second problem that we have, and I'm going to try to move through these pretty quickly because I'm running out of time here. My wife told me I would, and I always worry that I'm not going to have enough, but that's the way it always works when I get up here. So this is a twofold problem here. So number one, the laws that govern the universe would have to create themselves before the Big Bang could occur. But number two, the physical material of the universe would have to either be eternal or have been here forever or create itself. So the Big Bang model alleges that the universe began with all matter and energy, and it rapidly expanded, forming the universe. Where did it come from, though? And many believe in quantum fluctuation, where energy is transformed into the universe's matter. But again, to have quantum fluctuation, you would have to have what is called a quantum field. Where did the quantum field come from? Then we're looking at the law of causality here. So where did the energy come from? After explaining the scientific evidence from the natural realm, there are three relevant laws of science which prohibit a natural origin of the universe. And this is what Dr. Stubblefield mentioned earlier. The first law of thermodynamics is, in nature, matter and energy do not create themselves from nothing. Energy can be converted into matter and matter converted into energy, but the sum total amount of matter and energy in the universe must remain constant. So either matter or energy were created outside of the natural realm or they were eternal. The second law of thermodynamics is we are steadily running out of usable energy. The universe is wearing out or running down. So this implies that it could not have existed forever, or we would have long before exhausted all usable energy and be in a state of universal heat death. And the third law we've already talked about, the law of causality or the law of cause and effect. So for every effect in the natural realm, always has a cause. So when we look at scientific evidence for creation, so if you take a leap of faith and choose to believe in the Big Bang Theory, where did it come from? Again, law of causality. There are only three options. It is either, number one, eternal, meaning it's been here forever. Number two, spontaneous generation, it created itself. Or three, it was created by someone outside the natural realm, God. Evidence from nature and science discredit the first two. It can't be eternal because of the second law of thermodynamics. We would have ran out of usable energy. It can't create itself because of the first law of thermodynamics. Matter and energy can't create itself. They can change forms but cannot create themselves. It also can't be quantum fluctuation because, like I said earlier, there would have to be a quantum field, and then that poses the question of then where did the quantum field come from? So the first two would require a blind faith, and this leads us to the third option, which is God. And we can read that in Psalm 100, verse 3. Psalm 103 says, "Know that the Lord, He is God. It is He who has made us, and not we ourselves." Okay, so now we're to the third problem. This is the inflation problem. Remember, inflation is that initial moment of the Big Bang when the universe is said to have violently expanded faster than the speed of light. The problem with this is there's absolutely, again, no evidence of this. Assuming it is true, though, poses the same questions. What was the cause, and what caused it to stop? This, again, results in a blind faith. So you can see that a lot of these problems that we find with the Big Bang Theory all go back, and we're looking at, okay, well, where did that come from? So evolution, irrational or unnatural. There's also a video with this, and I've kind of put some notes down to kind of explain what it covers here. So many naturalists believe that God is dead. I think what they're trying to say by that is that the amount of people that believe in God and that are Christians are starting to wither away is what I think that they were trying to say by that in the video. And naturalism is the idea that everything in the universe came about naturally. And I found this statement by NAS very ironic. This is by the National Academy of Sciences, and they made a statement. And I'll read it through a couple times so you can actually understand what the statement is saying. It says, "The statements of science must only invoke natural things and processes. The statements of science are those that emerge from the application of human intelligence to data obtained from observation and experiment. The statements of science are those that emerge from the application of human intelligence to data obtained from observation and experiment." So, I mean, how do you, science is sitting there saying that every statement that comes out is data obtained from observation and experiment. And yet a lot of the theories that we see here, and especially this one that we're covering right now, there is no observation, it's unobservable, it will always be unobservable, and there is no evidence for it, and there is no way to test it or experiment it. So how are we here right now? Richard Dawkins stated that those who don't believe in evolution are ignorant, stupid, or insane. So,
You can turn that around.
yeah. I guess I fall in that category.
Just think about the human body even. I mean, if we had evolved, like they say, then, why are there millions of parts just to our kidney?
Right,
How did that evolve?
right,
And, or thousand parts, I won't say millions, but thousand parts to just that one organ.
right.
And everything else that works in our bodies to make us live.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I just,
It's amazing, isn't it? And we're going to look at,
anybody could believe that.
right, and we're going to look at that when we look at the anthropic principle, and we'll talk about the fine-tuned nature of life and the universe itself.
Of all the matter and all the energy and apparently all the intelligence that the scientific community has available to them, why in the world have they not created another universe yet?
Right,
Why don't they just use that energy and that matter and put them together?
right, exactly. And there's an article in here. If any of you guys want a copy of it, I'll be glad to give it to you. But it's by Kyle Butt. We just actually read a book in the high school class that he wrote. He's obviously a Christian, defending Christian stances against atheistic arguments. And he has an article that they're doing a lot of. And when I get to the slide, I can read through it if I have time. But they're doing a lot of, I guess, brand new research that's trying to mimic the heat levels that took place during that inflation period, and trying to test those things out. But I mean, we all know where that leads there. So now we're on the fourth problem, the dark energy problem. So Big Bang theorists see that the universe is expanding, which is a key observation argued to support the Big Bang theory. But with their model, it can't be explained why it is accelerating as opposed to decelerating, which would be expected. And this kind of goes with what Trey was saying about these things that just come up here. But in an attempt to be consistent with blind faith, the blind faith theme, dark energy was invented, and an enormous fudge factor was added to the cosmological equation. It is unknown, unobserved, and potentially always unobserved energy in space that is said to make up 73% of the universe. And they claim that this fudge, yes. You're fine. You're 100% all right. What's up?
Well, and I think as we get these new telescopes that are out in space, we can see further and further back in time, because the further you can see in the distance, the further you can see in time, that it's not fitting with the Big Bang theory, like you said, that it's not fitting with anything that they think it should be.
Right, right. And I think you're 100% right there. I think that's the conclusion they're going to come to. And hopefully they don't just try to come up with another theory or another way to I guess, cover their behind, so to speak. So they say that this fudge factor makes up 73% of the universe, and that put into the cosmological equation is what drives that accelerated expansion to support that. So that is the dark energy problem. And unobserved, 100%. Unobserved, there's no evidence of it, and will always be unobserved. Yeah, yes.
We're all Pluto's no longer a planet.
Yeah. So now we're on the smoothness problem. The smoothness problem is that the Big Bang model relies on a fundamental assumption that this is known as the cosmological principle, which is that the universe is uniform and homogeneous, or evenly spread out or evenly distributed. The actual the actual observable evidence suggests the opposite, that it is rather clumpy. For example, we have existence of stars, galaxies, we have clusters of galaxies, and so on and so forth, that clump together and that are not evenly spread out. So if the Big Bang model was true, then the universe would be smooth, it would be homogeneous, and it would be evenly distributed. But that is not what is observed. So now this brings us to the antimatter problem. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy can be transformed into matter, but when this occurs, an equal amount of antimatter, which is antimatter is matter with a reverse charge on its particles. This is always produced in that event. If the Big Bang theory is true, then once transformed, there should have been an equal amount of antimatter produced. But this clearly is not the case, because when the two touched, they would both have been destroyed and created energy. Today, the universe is virtually all composed of regular matter. The seventh problem, the Fermi paradox. If the Big Bang theory or model is true, then it is inconceivable that other life, even advanced life, ET, extraterrestrial, doesn't exist somewhere in the universe given the billions of stars and more planets. Life should have spontaneously generated and evolved like it did on Earth in many places throughout. Life should have colonized our region of the universe, and there is no evidence of extraterrestrials. So this is what they refer to as the Fermi paradox. Okay, so this is the anthropic principle that I was talking about a second ago. This principle describes the incredibly fine-tuned nature of the universe. Mounting evidence shows that it seems to be perfectly designed for life on Earth. To bypass the supernatural implications of the scientific evidence for design, example that there must be a designer, many cosmologists suggest that our universe is one of an infinite number within a multiverse, and we happen to live in this one, as we talked about earlier. This requires blind faith, and no evidence supports making it irrational. It's not a result of some big random cosmic bang. And I don't know, I can't remember what the exact degree is, but I know that our Earth's axis is tilted just ever so slightly, and it's positioned in a way that is just enough away from the sun that it could support life. And if it was off kilter even a little bit, that life wouldn't be supported. So that is what we call the anthropic principle, or the fine-tuned nature, just kind of like what you were saying about the parts of our body and how intricate they are. And me and Haley were talking about how the body can also compensate for itself. What were you saying about the kidney the other day?
Well, I won't go into all that, but basically, if one part of your body's not working, the other organs will work to try and compensate for that, without
Yeah.
you even having to think about it.
Right.
Just your body knows how to take care of itself.
Yeah.
Too, even with the fine tuning, everything relies on everything, so which one came first? Did the sun come first, or did the earth, was the earth there, did the earth tilt first? Like, which one of these things that are all needed simultaneously at the same time for everything to operate, which one of them got there first? And could it still operate without the other things there?
Right.
Same thing with the body. Did our heart come first, or our brain if we evolved? Did our brain cause our heart to pump, and our heart pumps blood back to the brain? So which, was there ever a time we didn't have one of these?
Exactly.
So it's hard to get all things there together if they occur slowly over time.
Yep. Does anybody have any questions or comments now that we've kind of looked at the eight big problems with the Big Bang theory?
Has the multiverse always been a thing? I thought that was just a comic strip.
I never heard about the multiverse growing up. I'm assuming it's a fairly new idea. As far, does anybody in here know when the multiverse idea or theory came out?
Well, for a long time, they've had theory of wormholes and this sort of thing, that you can go to another universe. That's been around for a long time.
Right.
Just in the science community.
Is that like what do they call it? The dark hole, the black hole?
Yeah, till recently,
exactly.
So, we don't know who created the law, we just prove that it works.
And it's really, it's interesting to me that, you know, we call it the Big Bang Theory, right? I mean, like you just said, it has to be proven for it to not be a theory and actually be a fact. But it's almost become a fact. I mean, how many people think that that's actually how the world was created? I mean, it's just so, it's so widely accepted now that you wouldn't even think it was
So why do they still
necessarily a
call it
theory.
Big Bang Theory?
What's that?
Why do they still call it a theory?
I think by
Yeah,
definition, they
it's-
would have
it-
to observe it to
right,
make the law. So
right.
it'll always ever be a theory.
Right.
I was just gonna tell you that this multiverse, Hugh Everett is who came up with it in 1954, and he was drinking sherry when he came up with it.
Is that what it says on there? Well, they, you know, and I've read something on it that it's supposed to be, you know, it's something out of a comic book, but I'd never heard that one. Yes.
This is probably a bit of a stretch, but apparently a meteor did hit Earth and destroyed the dinosaurs, right?
Yeah, we heard that in school, yeah.
Is that where the moon, is the moon maybe a part of Earth and maybe like?
You're saying it broke off?
Like Genesis 16, the greater light was ruled the day, the lesser light ruled the night. Do you think the moon might also been a part of Earth?
Yeah, I don't know. I've actually never pondered that idea, to be honest with you.
And, I don't know, just, well,
A little food for thought. A little food for thought.
It's interesting that science binds itself by these set of rules that inherently makes it difficult or impossible in this case for them to prove their theory. You know, they keep creating these rules and these laws of thermodynamics and all those things that work against them, actively work against them. You know, we don't have to bind ourselves to rules to make God work, you know.
Yeah, and I guess I just, it surprised me whenever I kind of deep dove into this lesson that it's such a widely accepted theory, but when you look at the laws of science, that they refute everything about it. So, I mean, that kind of blew my mind there.
Like, I want science to be difficult. We want things to be very strenuous and rigorous to understand what's pure and what's true. But we just want to be honest. And they're just not honest about this. And they know, you can read through most of their works, they say, oh yeah, we make assumptions here, or we guess at this, and other things. We just want to be honest about it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
You rarely hear, I don't know, you know. But, you know, it's, like I said before, it was crazy to see all those things that, I mean, I don't know how they would defend themselves in a debate situation on that, with hard facts and proven evidence, because there's not hardly anything out there. And that's the article that is, that I had on Kyle Butt. I don't have time to kind of read through some of my notes that I had on that. So we'll save that for another time, and you're more than welcome to get that from me if you want to read that. And there's also a lot of different supplements in the lesson plan if you're interested in any material from the lesson. So, you know, in conclusion, this lesson shows why evolution or the Big Bang Theory can't adequately explain the universe. Yes.
There are true scientists and there are false scientists, and we shouldn't lump them together. That the people who understand there is a God, understand the laws, and understand how to work them. They're not, it's not all bad and all good.
Yeah, that's a good point there. And if I made that come across that way, that was definitely not my intention. Because growing up, I had science teachers that were Christians and knew people that were in different school districts that were good people that, you know, were very interested in science type things. Maybe not a high level scientist, but you know, we shouldn't categorize everyone in that category. Yes.
The laws of nature are of such nature that they would have had to come into existence immediately. For example, the law of gravity. That evolved over millions of years. Think of the chaos.
Yeah.
The history of how the law of gravity was developed.
Yeah.
It had to come into existence immediately.
Right. Right.
And that's the way the Bible depicts it, immediate creation.
Exactly. Yeah.
For anything, a human being to design a car, build a house, there has to be a designer, someone come up with the plan, somebody to bring it about. That's the way the world came about, that's how
That's right.
Whether other people wanna believe it or not, to me, it doesn't make any kind of intelligent sense for them to disbelieve it if you apply it to anything today that we do.
I agree with you 100%.
I got, like, one last thing.
Yes. Mhm.
A lot of atheists I've noticed are very mad or disgruntled with God. Am I wrong?
I would think that some of them would fall into that category and others wouldn't. I wouldn't assume that everyone has that same feeling.
So my question is, how could you be mad at something that doesn't exist?
Right, right. And my main goal here is that I know that, you know, it's not something that I understood a lot about, evolution, but it is something that people that we're trying to bring to Christ actually feel and believe. So it's important that we try to get as much information as we can. Thank y'all. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
Before we get started, I've got a couple of questions for some of the classes. So this first question is for the 2 and 3-year-olds. All right. So here's the question: who created light? God did. That's correct. This question is for Miss Debbie's class. Who created the heavens and the earth? God did. Another question. On what day did God create light? Day one. Excellent. This is for Miss Christie's class. What did God create on day 6? Animals and man. Very good. It's somebody raise your hand on this one. What does Genesis 1:1 say?
start off as a butterfly? What does it start off as? A caterpillar. Does everybody have a caterpillar? We are going to sing about Fuzzy the caterpillar. Are you ready? Fuzzy was a caterpillar. He wiggled up a tree. He wiggled once, he wiggled twice, he wiggled right at me. I put him in a little box. Don't go away, I said. And when I opened up the box, a butterfly it said. Oh, I could never make one, not even if I tried. But only God and Him alone can make a butterfly. All right, very good. So we're going to be really quiet right now, and we're going to offer the Lord's Supper for the ones that haven't had a chance to partake of it. So let's be really quiet and okay.
Are there any here tonight that wish to take the Lord's Supper? Would you raise your hands, please? I don't see anyone in the world.
Steve? All right. Did everybody have a good time tonight? Yes. Who's going to be back tomorrow night? So we are going to sing a song, but before, hold on, let's be quiet. Let's be quiet. Before we sing a song, we're going to be led to dismissal prayer by Brother Bridget. So after we sing after we say the prayer, then we will sing the booster song. All right, Brother Bridget, let's everybody stand up. Let's have our prayer hands. Let's everybody be real quiet.
Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for a wonderful night to come out and learn more from your word. Pray that all the kids had fun and learned a lot, as well as the results. We thank you for our Stonebridge family here, and all the teachers, everyone that's gone through a lot of work to help put this on this week. Pray that you be with us for the rest of this week. We ask you to forgive us of all of our sins, Lord, and we thank you for sending your Son Jesus to die on the cross for our sins. It's in His name that we pray. Amen.
This is going to be a really good week for us. So let's try to come back each and every night. Booster, booster,